You were trained to believe explanation is virtue. That clarity equals honesty. That if you're misunderstood, the moral response is to clarify, justify, confess. That belief was installed, not discovered. And it is the first leash placed around your neck. Power never explains itself downward. Never. It issues outcomes, not footnotes. The moment you explain, you implicitly accept a lower position in the hierarchy. You acknowledge that someone else has the right to evaluate you. You step into their frame and ask to be judged fairly. That request alone is surrender. Silence does something violent to social order. It removes the familiar reference points. People expect a defense, a reason, a narrative they can dissect. When it doesn't arrive, the balance shifts. Their mind begins working for you. They speculate. They fill gaps. They project guilt, strength, arrogance, authority, whatever their own psychology supplies. You are no longer reacting. You are being reacted to. This is the lens shift. Explanation is not communication. It is compliance. Every explanation is an admission that the other party's perception matters more than your position. You may think you're being reasonable. What you are actually doing is negotiating from weakness. You're saying, I need you to understand me so I can exist safely. Predators hear that sentence clearly, even if it's never spoken aloud. Silence, by contrast, implies surplus power. It suggests optionality. A man with options does not rush to be understood. He doesn't panic at misinterpretation. He lets others orbit his decisions, not the reverse. Silence signals that consequences will arrive whether or not approval does. Notice who explains in every environment. Employees explain to managers. Defendants explain to judges. Children explain to parents. The hierarchy is obvious because explanation always flows upward. When someone above you explains themselves to you, it feels strange, even suspicious. That discomfort is the tell. Your nervous system already knows the rule. Silence reverses interrogation. When you don't explain, the other party begins revealing themselves instead. Their tone shifts. They press harder. They accuse. They bargain. Each move exposes their leverage or lack of it. You gain intelligence without giving any. This is asymmetric warfare at the conversational level. You were also sold the lie that silence equals guilt, that only the innocent rush to clarify. This is legal propaganda disguised as morality. In reality, innocence has nothing to prove. Guilt scrambles. Weakness over-communicates. Strength lets ambiguity burn. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Authority is maintained not by transparency, but by controlled opacity. When rulers explained too much, they invited debate. Debate invites challenge. Challenge invites replacement. So they learned to speak sparsely, act decisively, and let results silence dissent. Modern men were domesticated out of this instinct. You were taught to be agreeable, legible, emotionally accessible. Those traits make you easy to manage, easy to extract from, easy to blame. Explanation became your reflex because compliance was rewarded and resistance was punished early. This chapter isn't telling you to be mysterious for aesthetics. That's amateur behavior. It's telling you to understand the structural function of silence. Silence is not absence, it is pressure. It forces others to move first. It denies them leverage. It preserves your frame. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. Every time you feel the urge to explain, that urge itself becomes data. It tells you where you are not sovereign yet, where you still seek permission to exist without consequence. The shift begins here. Stop thinking of silence as passive. It is an action, a deliberate refusal to hand over power disguised as politeness. And once you adopt this lens, You will start noticing how quickly dynamics change, sometimes instantly, sometimes violently, when you remove your explanations from the table. The urge to explain is not rational. It is neurological. When your status is threatened, your nervous system scrambles to restore safety. Explanation is the fastest submission signal available to a social animal. It says, "Don't exile me, don't punish me, I'll cooperate." This reflex evolved for survival in tribes. In hierarchies, it becomes a liability. When someone challenges you, questions your decision, your tone, your intent, they are not seeking information. They are testing rank. The content is irrelevant. The subtext is everything. If you respond with explanation, you accept the test. You step into defense. Defense implies vulnerability. Vulnerability invites pressure. Explanation hands over three assets simultaneously: frame, time, and moral high ground. First, frame. The moment you explain, you accept the other person's premise that something needs explaining. You legitimize their accusation or confusion. Even if you win the argument, you've already lost the position. You're arguing inside their courtroom, under their rules, pleading your case. Second, time. Explanation elongates interaction. It creates openings. Every sentence spawns follow-up questions, reinterpretations, distortions. The longer you speak, the more surface area you expose. Power prefers brevity because brevity denies hooks. Silence starves escalation. Third, moral high ground. This is the most subtle theft. When you explain, you implicitly declare yourself accountable to the other person's judgment. You place them above you as evaluator. Even if they are wrong, even if they are weak, your explanation elevates them temporarily. That elevation is often all they wanted. Interrogators know this instinctively. That's why they push for justification, not truth. Courts, HR departments, partners in conflict, they don't ask what happened. They ask why. Why forces narrative? Narrative forces self-incrimination. The more coherent and detailed your explanation, the more material they have to weaponize later. Your brain betrays you here. Under stress, it prioritizes social survival over strategic position. It confuses being understood with being safe. But understanding does not protect you. It exposes you. The world does not reward transparency. It exploits it. Notice how explanation escalates rather than resolves conflict. You clarify once. The other party seizes a word. You clarify again. Now you're justifying your justification. Each loop pulls you deeper into their frame. Eventually, you are no longer defending an action, you are defending your character. At that point, you are owned. Silence interrupts this cascade. Psychologically, it does something brutal. It denies closure. Humans are addicted to narrative completion. When you refuse to explain, the other person experiences cognitive dissonance. Their brain wants resolution. You don't provide it. That discomfort often forces them to reveal intent: anger, insecurity, neediness, authority, hunger. This is why silence feels rude or cold. Those labels are defenses. They are attempts to shame you back into compliance. If silence were truly powerless, it wouldn't provoke such emotional reactions. The intensity of the response measures the leverage you're withholding. Explanation also broadcasts need. It says you care how you're perceived. That care can be exploited. Once someone knows you need to be seen as fair, kind, reasonable, they can bait you endlessly. Accuse you of cruelty, misunderstanding, insensitivity. Each accusation is a lever. Explanation is how they pull it. Power does the opposite. It withholds. It lets accusations die unanswered. It understands that not every claim deserves oxygen. Some challenges collapse when ignored because they were never about justice-only control. This chapter implants a hard rule. Explanation is not neutral. It is a concession, sometimes a necessary one, but always a costly one. Until you understand the psychological mechanics behind it, you will keep giving ground unconsciously, mistaking articulation for strength. Once you see explanation for what it is, a stress response masquerading as virtue, you can choose differently. And choice is where power begins. Human hierarchies sort themselves fast, not by intelligence, not by morality, by behavioral tells. Explanation is one of the loudest tells there is. It separates those who seek permission from those who assume authority. There are 3 dominant archetypes you will encounter and rotate through, until selection corrects you. The first is the apologetic narrator. This man explains before he's even challenged. He over-contextualizes. He anticipates objections and answers them preemptively. He believes foresight will protect him. In reality, it advertises fear. He is trying to control outcomes by managing perceptions. Power reads this as weakness because it reveals dependence on approval. The apologetic narrator is easy to manipulate. Accuse him lightly and he collapses into clarification. Push harder and he offers concessions. He mistakes exhaustion for resolution and compliance for peace. In every group, he becomes the liability overworked, under-respected, first to be blamed when outcomes sour. The second archetype is the defensive rationalizer. He waits for attack, then explains aggressively. He marshals facts, logic, timelines. He wants to win. This is an upgrade from the first, but still subordinate. His mistake is believing that correctness equals control. It doesn't. The defensive rationalizer still accepts the challenger's authority to question him. He just fights harder inside the frame. He argues his way into endless debate, thinking dominance will emerge from superior reasoning. It never does. Debate equalizes. It drags both parties onto the same level. Power avoids equality. Both of these archetypes share the same flaw. They are reactive. Their explanations are not strategic, they are emotional responses to threat. The third archetype is the silent operator. This man does not rush to clarify. He does not flinch at misunderstanding. He does not argue for his intentions. He lets outcomes speak and lets others interpret as they will. When challenged, he pauses. Sometimes he says nothing. Sometimes he responds with a sentence so minimal it starves follow-up. The silent operator is unsettling because he breaks the script. People are trained to expect explanation. When it doesn't arrive, they assume hidden leverage. Even when there is none, perception does the work. Authority is often assumed, not proven. This archetype controls interactions without dominating them overtly. He allows others to overextend, to talk themselves into corners, to expose motives. While the explainers leak information, he gathers it. While they justify, he observes. Selection favors him. Look at any power structure, corporate, political, criminal, social. The individuals at the top do not narrate their reasoning to subordinates. They issue decisions. If challenged, they redirect, delay, or disengage. Explanation is delegated downward. Silence is reserved upward. This is not personality. It is behavior under pressure. Most men oscillate between the first 2 archetypes because they were rewarded for it early. Teachers praised explanation. Parents demanded justification. Institutions conditioned them to equate obedience with virtue. Over time, explanation became identity. I am the reasonable one, the fair one, the transparent one. That identity is expensive. It requires constant maintenance. You must always be available to explain, defend, clarify. The moment you refuse, people accuse you of changing, becoming cold, losing empathy. Those accusations are withdrawal symptoms. They reveal how much access you use to provide. The silent operator accepts those labels without flinching. He understands that social friction is the price of autonomy. He does not seek to be liked across ranks. He seeks to be unchallenged where it matters. This chapter forces a mirror in front of you. Not to comfort you, but to locate you. Which archetype emerges when your status is questioned? Which one costs you leverage every time? You don't need to become cruel. You need to become unreadable. And that begins by recognizing which behavioral pattern you've been unconsciously performing and which one survives long-term selection. Power does not confront directly unless it must. It probes, it pressures, it creates ambiguity and waits for you to expose yourself. The primary bait it uses is justification, not because it wants truth, but because justification is a self-inflicted wound. History is clear on this. Every institution that consolidates power first expands its right to demand explanations. Courts don't ask for silence. They compel testimony. Bureaucracies don't punish actions alone. They punish insufficient reasoning. Social mobs don't attack outcomes. They attack intent. Why did you do this? What were you thinking? Explain yourself. Once you explain, the hunt begins. Explanation creates a record. Records can be replayed, reframed, excerpted, and turned against you later. This is why powerful systems push for written statements, documented rationales, emails clarifying tone. They are not protecting clarity, they are stockpiling ammunition. In medieval courts, confession was considered the queen of evidence. Not because it revealed truth, but because it transferred ownership of guilt from the system to the individual. Modern power structures learn the same lesson. Make the subject explain, and he will do the system's work for it. This dynamic extends far beyond law. In relationships, justification becomes control. The partner who constantly asks why is not curious. They are training you to submit. Every explanation reaffirms their right to audit your behavior. Over time, you stop acting freely. You begin pre-editing your actions to avoid interrogation. That is behavioral capture. In workplaces, justification becomes leverage. Managers who demand constant updates and reasoning are not managing productivity, they are asserting dominance. The employee who explains the most becomes the most visible, the most accountable, the easiest to blame. Silence, paradoxically, often protects higher performers because it limits scrutiny. In social groups, justification becomes ritual sacrifice. Someone is accused of violating an unspoken norm. The group demands an explanation. No explanation is ever sufficient because sufficiency was never the goal. The goal was submission. The more you explain, the deeper you sink. Human nature makes this unavoidable. People interpret explanation as guilt adjacent, even when they asked for it. Especially when they asked for it. The act of defending triggers suspicion. Why are you so eager to clarify? What are you hiding? The trap closes from both sides. Power understands this asymmetry. It explains selectively upward, vaguely sideways, and never downward. It offers statements, not rationales. Outcomes, not narratives. When forced to speak, it speaks in abstractions that cannot be pinned down. Values, vision, policy. Never specifics that can be replayed as weapons. Those below power are taught the opposite. Be transparent. Be accountable. Be open. These words sound moral. They function as extraction tools. They encourage voluntary disclosure under the illusion of fairness. The most dangerous part, the explanation reflex, feels virtuous. You feel clean after explaining. You feel reasonable, cooperative, that relief is chemical. Cortisol drops. The nervous system relaxes. Meanwhile, you have handed over leverage you may never recover. This is why power doesn't need to threaten you overtly. It just needs to create conditions where explanation feels necessary. Confusion, accusation, moral pressure. Time urgency. Under those conditions, most men explain themselves into irrelevance. Once you see how justification is hunted, you stop seeing requests for explanation as neutral. You start asking a better question. Who benefits if I explain this? If the answer is not you, silence becomes not just an option, but a defensive necessity. This chapter is not about paranoia. It is about pattern recognition. Power has patterns. So does exploitation. And explanation is the oldest trap in the book because men keep stepping into it willingly. Silence without strategy is just absence. Strategic non-explanation is a weapon. It is deliberate, calibrated, and situational. Used correctly, it collapses challenges before they mature. Used poorly, it exposes you. This chapter installs discipline, not mystique. First rule, not every challenge deserves a response. Most challenges are probes. They are testing boundaries, not seeking clarity. When you respond reflexively, you teach others where your edges are. When you withhold, you force them to guess, and guessing weakens their position. The strategic response is often no response. Silence works best when the challenger lacks formal authority over you. Peers, acquaintances, subordinates, social equals, these are the domains where non-explanation dominates. Here, explanation lowers you. Silence elevates you. It suggests that their opinion does not reach your decision-making process. Second rule, when you must speak, starve them. Minimalism is lethal. One sentence. Sometimes 3 words. Never a paragraph. Never a narrative. The goal is not to convince, it is to close the interaction. Statements and conversations. Explanations extend them. Notice the difference. An explanation invites follow-ups. A statement invites compliance or escalation. Escalation reveals intent. Intent gives you leverage. I've made my decision. This is how it will be handled. I disagree. These are not arguments. They are boundaries. Third rule, never explain emotions. The moment you justify how you feel, you give others a handle on your internal state. They will pull it. Emotion is the softest surface area you have. Protect it. If accused of coldness, distance, arrogance, do not correct the label. Labels are cages. Accepting them removes their power. Resistance feeds them. Strategic non-explanation also requires timing. Silence early is dominance. Silence late can look evasive. If you've already over-explained in the past, withdrawal will cause turbulence. Expect backlash. Expect accusations of change. That turbulence is not failure, it is recalibration. Understand this. People do not react to silence because it is harmful. They react because it disrupts their access. Fourth rule, no, when explanation is mandatory. Courts, contracts, formal hierarchies. When authority is codified, refusal to explain becomes self-destructive. Even then, explanation must be surgical. Answer only what is asked. No context. No volunteering. No narrative. Precision replaces transparency. This is how power survives hostile environments, not by lying, but by limiting exposure. Strategic non-explanation also shifts your internal behavior. When you stop explaining externally, you stop justifying internally. You act more decisively. You hesitate less. You feel less compelled to seek consensus. This is not because you become reckless. but because you stop negotiating with imaginary juries. Silence forces others to deal with outcomes instead of intentions. Outcomes are harder to argue with. Intentions are endlessly debatable. Power prefers the former. There is a cost. You will be misunderstood, intentionally, permanently. Accept that now. If you need to be understood by everyone, you will never be sovereign. Sovereignty requires insulation from consensus. This chapter is not telling you to disappear. It is telling you to compress. To speak like someone whose time, position, and attention are scarce. When explanation stops being your reflex, it becomes your choice. And when it becomes your choice, it becomes leverage. This is where resistance spikes. Because explanation is not just a habit, it is who you think you are. The reasonable one. The fair one. The man who gives context so others don't misjudge him. That identity feels moral. It feels mature. It is also the mechanism through which you are controlled to gain sovereignty. That identity has to die. The explicable identity was formed under pressure. As a boy, explanation reduced punishment. As a student, it earned approval. As a man, it avoided conflict. Each time it worked, it reinforced the behavior. Over years, you learn that survival meant being legible, predictable, auditable. Power despises legibility. The explicable believes that if people just understood, they would be reasonable. This belief is naive. Most people do not seek understanding, they seek advantage. Explanation gives them material to extract that advantage while you remain convinced. You are engaging in good faith. Killing this identity does not mean becoming dishonest. It means decoupling your self-worth from being perceived as fair or good. Those labels are currency. Whoever defines them controls you. The death process is uncomfortable. When you stop explaining, anxiety surfaces. Your nervous system will demand relief. It will urge you to clarify, soften, justify. This is withdrawal. You are removing a social sedative. Do not mistake discomfort for danger. Let misunderstanding stand. Let false narratives circulate. Let others project. Every time you resist the urge to correct, you reclaim territory. Not externally, internally. You teach yourself that you do not need consensus to act. That your decisions do not require audience approval. That silence will not kill you. Identity replacement follows naturally. The sovereign identity does not rush to define itself. It allows others to infer. It understands that clarity is not owed, it is traded. It speaks when there is return on investment. It withholds when speaking would only satisfy someone else's insecurity. This identity also changes how you perceive conflict. Instead of asking, "How do I explain this better?" you ask, "Why am I being asked to explain at all?" That question alone neutralizes most traps. You will notice something else. People begin adjusting their behavior around you. Some withdraw. They were feeding on access. Others become cautious. They sense boundaries. A few will escalate, attempting to provoke explanation through accusation or moral pressure. Those are the most dangerous and the most revealing. Do not engage. Silence during escalation is identity cement. It signals that your core is not negotiable. That pressure does not buy access. Over time, escalation becomes pointless. Selection takes place quietly. Those who cannot extract value from you move on. This is not isolation. It is filtration. The explicable identity wants to be included. The sovereign identity selects inclusion. One begs to be judged fairly. The other decides who is even allowed to judge. This chapter is the point of no return. Once you experience the internal shift, when silence stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like control, you will not go back. Explanation will feel heavy, wasteful, Dangerous. What replaces it is not arrogance. It is gravity. There is no neutral ground. Every interaction selects for or against you. Every moment you choose to explain, someone learns they can pull that lever again. Every moment you refuse, someone recalculates your cost. Selection is not moral. It is mechanical. You live inside systems that are constantly sorting who is promotable, who is exploitable, who is safe to pressure, who must be approached carefully. These judgments are made quietly, without your consent, based on patterns. Explanation is one of the clearest patterns they track. Men who over-explain are marked as manageable. They can be steered with accusation, pacified with fairness talk, delayed with dialogue. When resources tighten, they are the first to be sacrificed because they will accept the reasoning. Men who do not explain are treated differently. Not always kindly, but carefully. Power does not waste energy interrogating what does not respond predictably. It seeks easier leverage elsewhere. This is the final inversion. Silence is not antisocial. It is anti-extraction. You were taught that refusing to explain is rude, immature, or insecure. That lesson serves someone else's order, not your survival. In high-pressure environments, politeness is often just obedience in a softer uniform. The warning is simple. Once you are identified as someone who always explains, the label sticks. You don't get to explain your way out of it. Every future interaction is filtered through that expectation. Undoing it requires sustained behavioral rupture. That rupture has consequences. Some doors close. Some alliances dissolve. Some people turn hostile because their access is gone. Let them. Access was the entire relationship. When the explanation supply dries up, so does their interest. That is not loss. That is exposure. The men who rise do not announce their boundaries. They enforce them through absence, brevity, and outcome. They do not warn. They do not clarify. They do not correct every misinterpretation. They let time and consequence do the work. This is the elite filter. If you adopt silence selectively and consistently, you will notice selection accelerating. Fewer demands. Fewer interrogations. More deference disguised as neutrality. People speak differently around you. They choose words more carefully. They stop assuming access to your internal world. That is the signal you have crossed the line. This is not a tactic you deploy occasionally. It is a posture. A refusal to live as an open ledger. A decision to be partially unknowable in a world that profits from your transparency. The final warning stands. Explanation is irreversible in the moment. Once given, it cannot be taken back. Silence preserves optionality. Optionality is power. Choose accordingly.